Now, Roger, from time to time, there is a film that gets everybody excited and everybody in agreement about how amazing and what a success it is. Critics, moviegoers, filmmakers, media companies galore got behind Dog Soldiers 20 years ago. Let's watch a trailer again.
I heard a cracking story about this place. A young couple were hiking through these woods. During the night, something happened. Help me. Captain, what happened here?
Get in! There's one farm that can take your men there.
No more running. We stand. We fight. Come on, you beauty!
You're behind me, aren't you?
Wow. I mean, I went to the movies to see this on the basis of an article in a magazine I used to buy all the time called Total Film. And Neil Marshall, the director and the writer, had been featured. There was like pages upon pages of content about the movie, but it was mostly about the making the movie. There was not so much about the story, so there was no spoilers. And when I sat there in the cinema in Newcastle with Denise, and we left thinking, this was brilliant. Do you remember watching Dog Soldiers 20 years ago?
Yes, and again, do you know one of the things that really makes this movie for me is that they take the time to carefully get you to like the characters at the start. There's quite a lot of character building, isn't there? There's an incredible scene early on in the film where Sean Pertwee tells a story about something that happened in Iraq, and it's quite a gruesome story, but it doesn't half bond all of those soldiers together, and you learn about them, and you start to like them, so that when it all starts kicking off later, when they all start getting attacked and some of them unfortunately die, you really feel it. And sometimes films don't do that, do they? I've watched quite a lot of films recently where I just don't care about the characters, so when they come to a grisly end, it's almost like, okay, fine. But this one, you know, the writing was so good that within minutes you felt like you knew these characters inside out, and that is a remarkable bit of writing and a remarkable bit of filming.
I would agree. You know, there was very, very quickly, you're absolutely right, there was this idea of, I want that group to do well and survive. Yeah. There's also a number of individuals, actually, not just the werewolves, that I disliked very quickly. And yeah. I want you and a number of others to not make it. And your commitment and the way in which you invest in the story is outstanding. But you mentioned the writing. That we do know, because of Colonel Marshall has been very, very open and actually very generous with the information. Because I think for me, it was at the time where I was really getting into this discovery and journey of discovery around filmmaking and particularly indie production. He wrote the first draft in 96. Just, you know, quite some years later, and kept refining it and kept talking to people, and of course putting together the financing and the cast and crew. And with that, I think maybe there's a lesson, which is it may take time for you to get to the final product.
Absolutely right. I mean, he stuck at it, didn't he? And he had this vision, again, which is always very important. He didn't want to do a classic werewolf film. Now, if you actually think about it, and I didn't really think about it until we did some research for this particular film, but a lot of werewolf films of the past, and things like An American Werewolf in London, they tend to focus on the individual who has become infected and will then transform when the full moon comes up. And he didn't want to make another film which was very much in that sort of, oh, isn't it a shame about the person who's been infected? He just wanted an all-out, almost like Aliens with werewolves, didn't he? He just wanted a group of people base under siege sort of thing, stuck in a house in the middle of nowhere with all these creatures around surrounding them, and build the drama out of that scenario. And it obviously took time to get there. And the lesson that we can all learn, as you've said, from our marketing, from our product development, is, by all means, keep developing something, but don't feel that the first iteration absolutely has to be the one that you put out there. Refine it until it becomes perfect. Well, maybe not perfect. We'll never get to perfect, but refine it a few times so that it matures.
For me, it was clear, certainly from the cast point of view, and I was expected therefore by the crew, that they were committed to telling the story. They were committed to the audience for us to have a brilliant time. In terms of the story structure, we can say it was superbly filmed. Bear in mind, the resources they had. Once again, you really care for the characters. We're going to speak in a moment about how they went about creating the werewolves and how very different they are to other films. Interestingly, there's a second werewolf movie that we reviewed on the Geeks Marketing podcast. For me, it is clear, and from the interviews, but also actually from the film itself. I mean, this sits on my bookshelf, DVD shelf, alongside Doomsday, The Descent, and Centurion. And it's the idea of Neil Marshall loves film. And in this one, there are references if you want to see them, but they're not distracting. So you mentioned that monologue from Sean Pertwee around the campfire. For me, is Neil Marshall's Jaws moment when we had the monologue from Bernard Shaw. And if you've not seen Dog Soldiers, I'll say no more, but there is a scary bit in there as well, and the story just takes a turn, very much like you would expect in a film. You have reference to aliens, you have reference, although he said it wasn't meant to be, to the Matrix. You have reference, for me, the way in which they have to try and stay safe inside the cabin, to Night of the Living Dead or Assault on Precinct 13. You've got all that going on, but it's almost its own celebration of cinema as Neil Marshall has lived it, but also creating a story that is unique. And the reason why I think the media in particular has gone behind it is a sense of pride. And actually, internationally, this is called the UK werewolf movie. It's become its own little mini brand.
Yeah, absolutely, and it didn't actually get a cinema release in the States, did it? It went straight to VHS at the time, and that's a criminal act, isn't it? It's such a good movie. You really do need to experience it on the big screen. But it, like a lot of movies of this kind, it has created a bigger following over time. And of course, when it was released initially on VHS and then DVD, and now there's a 4K version out there as well, that the following, it's achieved more than cult status now.
What is absolutely fascinating is this is a movie that is talked about on a regular basis. If you go on YouTube, just as a barometer, over the last 20 years, people have done reviews, they've done even fan-made trailers using snippets from the movie. So the movie is talked about by the audience in a manner that is just quite extraordinary. We know, because of course it was documented, that Marshall was very disappointed by the lack of cinema release in the US. He got a proper release in the UK because we went. I'd imagine the rest of Europe. We've seen that with Highlander. Do you remember with Highlander, there was just that nervousness and hesitation in the US market. But for the people who could watch it, I think it was on Sci-Fi Channel that could watch it. The US movie lovers, went behind it and created, therefore, the word-of-mouth marketing and PR they would expect.
Yeah, and obviously, it's the other thing that is remarkable about this is how much they achieved on such a low budget. I mean, there was no CGI as far as I can. I think they tried some tests with CGI, but it was probably in its infancy and it just didn't look good. They didn't have the budget to create the transformation effects from human to werewolf that you saw in the likes of American Werewolf in London. So they actually had to resort to what sounds like the old style cheesy transformation where literally the character, maybe they put some contact lenses over their eyes to make their eyes go yellow, and then they curl up and start making a lot of noise, and then they fall down behind a chair or behind a table, and then they get up and they've transformed. I mean, that sounds so utterly cheesy and cheap, doesn't it? But he pulls it off so well that you don't even notice, and I think that's absolutely key to the fact that this was so well made that even by doing that, they got away with it and made it look really impressive.
Yeah, because again, we are invested as an audience. It pays off. I'll make another link with Joe's, but when Steven Spielberg was saying, but your shark looks rubbish, man. It's rubber. It doesn't move properly and so on. But he was saying, but by the time the shark is revealed, the audience is with us. And I think that was the case there with Dog Soldiers. But when the werewolves are revealed, again, a commitment in terms of Neil Marshall's story and being a bit different. He used real kind of practical special effects of people wearing the outfits. They look great, and he also used dancers. So he wanted them to move in a way that felt again very, very different.
Yeah, absolutely, and you get very quick shots, don't you, Pascal? They don't linger too much, and that's probably again a good thing. Just like in Jaws, as you say, you get the glimpses until right towards the end when you actually get to see them on screen for longer, and I think the dancers really made them a little bit weird as well. The movement was not what you expect, and I think that again just added to the atmosphere. The other thing that I was interested in is that we nearly got Jason Statham in this film. Apparently, he was originally going to be playing the role of Cooper, who's the main hero of the show, I guess, but he couldn't actually do it. He had a prior commitment to go to the States to work with John Carpenter, so we got the actor who plays Cooper instead. But again, great acting. I think that Sean Pertwee is one of our most underrated actors, and his performance in this is just superb, absolutely superb. He's got humour, he's got timing, he's got melancholy, he's got energy. I really do think he's underrated.
So a couple of things I wanted to mention about the marketing. Now, it is, of the nature of an indie production sometimes to have limitations or for things to be taken off your hand by the distributors and so on. But there was certainly a strong artwork that was shared in terms of the posters, eventually the DVD covers and so on. Then people have been messing on over the years. But for me, the original artwork is the best. It's the one where you have a soldier that is backlit by, we suspect, a full moon, and the shadow has the shape of a werewolf, and you have the caption 6 men, full moon, no chance, which always makes me smile, and then you have the quote and 5 stars from a review, a bitch of a werewolf movie, and you put that out in terms of posters and DVD covers, and you are truly on your way to festivals and film markets.
Yeah, and one of the other posters quotes as well is Jaws, Aliens, and Predator with a werewolf twist. I mean, you're name dropping 3 incredible action movies there and suspense movies, and you're going to draw people in just by using that tagline. One of the things I was very interested in when we watched the trailer again there is the trailers almost poking fun at the audience a little bit, because yes, it's got this montage of shots, so you see glimpses of the werewolves, you see the soldiers in action, but there's captions at the bottom saying there are 6 people trapped in the house, which one of them will lose their nerve first, and it's almost like a little extra game that's going on in the trailer. And then at the end it says, hands up if you predicted it was going to be the woman. Don't be so sexist. And I thought, that's interesting. I've never actually seen that happen in a trailer before. That was almost in addition to the information we were getting about the movie, that they were almost having a bit of a laugh with the audience there.
Indeed, and the trap line you mentioned a moment ago, it's sometimes used actually to mislead an audience, but in this one, it was true. All those amazing references and all those amazing adventure movies that we've all kind of had great memories, are there as part of inspiration. I mean, he himself, was thinking, I want to recreate almost that feeling of in Zulu where they are completely outnumbered, and how would you survive? And it's almost what happens, as much as again. There's a wonderful kind of juxtaposition between the gory, scary elements and the humor. Some of the one-liners are absolutely amazing. But this idea of, what would I do in that situation?
And we've talked about the poster, we've talked about the trailer. I absolutely love the poster cover for the 4K release. The 4K release is quite recent in the last couple of years, but it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a little bit comic booky in my mind, but it's absolutely beautiful. But there's even a story about the release of the DVDs and the Blu-rays, because we were saying before about protecting your assets and things like that and patents, but they actually lost the original negative for this film after it had been released. And when it came time to release it on Blu-ray and DVD, they really didn't have a decent copy that could cope with the quality that a Blu-ray could bring. And eventually they did find a 35mm decent copy of the film from which they created the Blu-ray. But in order to launch the 4K version, for which you need an absolutely pristine negative, they were really in trouble until somebody actually managed to find the negative. And from that, they were then able to launch the 4K version. And I found an interview with Neil Marshall when he was describing this, and he was saying it was like looking for the lost Ark of the Covenant. I think it was buried in the Well of Souls somewhere. Nobody knew where the negative was, which was just a terrifying thought that for an independent filmmaker, that they'd lost the negative. But then about a year later, the producer contacted me and say, I found it. I found the neg. And they were then able to launch the 4K version.
It's scary that things like this could get lost. It's just like, staggering that people are not organized well enough, or maybe there's a storage issue, but to lose something like this seems so inappropriate and crazy. But I'm so pleased that he found it. And I think if we could take our mind back to 2002, so we mentioned the coverage, particularly in print media, was quite something for a film that, frankly, belongs to the low budget, era. Is also very, very British and so on. And I think we should that. And I'm sure it was great for the cast and crew, for Neil Marshall and anybody else, to get recognition at the Brussels International Film Festival, Fantasy Film Festival. That at that time, the president was not other than Christopher Lee. And they won the award there for best film. That's just a nice nod and recognition from your peers that perhaps was needed after what would have been for Neil Marshall 6-7 years of hard graft.
Absolutely right. I mean, I love the fact that Christopher Lee was the president at the time. That's fantastic. But yeah, this is, again, this is one of those films that a lot of people will never have heard of. They might dismiss it because it's it's just another werewolf movie. But this is more than a werewolf movie. This, the fact that we've compared it to Jaws on many occasions, it is great acting, great writing, great filmmaking, and the tension is palpable. So if you haven't seen this, please go and find that glorious 4K disc with its glorious cover and give this a watch with the lights turned down.
Indeed. And I'll finish with a bit of news, which I think you know already. Neil Marshall is indeed in talks with many others for a sequel. So that would be just absolutely delightful. Right, everybody. This was episode 64. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and thank you to you, Roger, for being such an amazing co-host. Until the next one, go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. I was Pascal Fintoni, and he was Roger Edwards.